to a new world order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. It is July 30th, 2014. Tonight's live edition, I am hanging out with another good friend of mine. And as I've said before, when I have someone who's a close friend and a fellow radio show host and an enlightened individual, I don't really consider them to be like a guest that I'm interviewing. It's more so, especially when they've been on the broadcast before, it's more so they're like a guest co-host hanging out with me and just having a free-flowing conversation about whatever the topic is that we choose to talk about that night. And tonight, I'm welcoming back to the broadcast. It's been way too long, just extremely too long, my good friend, Mr. Nathan Fraser. Nathan, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Popeye.
So everybody's clear really quick. I want to plug all your stuff. Nathan has a radio show, and he's been doing his radio show for quite a while now. I've known Nathan for a few years. We've kind of come up through this radio thing, together. Like we both got into it very, years ago when it was more in its infancy stage. Not that it's not now, right? But I've watched you grow, and I've watched you kind of your pursuit of freedom kind of change and I guess grow. It's the only proper term I could think of right now off the top of my head. But like the two of us, we've been on our own paths, but yet, we kind of headed towards the same thing. And I've been really wanting to get you back on the broadcast for a while now, Nathan. And I don't know why, whatever retarded scheduling issues that I have, or just for lack of just, hitting you up earlier, I should have gotten you on sooner to have this conversation. But the topic that I know you wanted to chat about tonight was what true freedom, what is it? And then we can get into tools on how to actually live in true freedom. Not just talk about it, but actually practice it, because that's actually what'll change things. Again, changing things on the personal level changes things, outwardly on the world level, because other people will start to see the change in you, and then they'll want to do it, and then other people will see their change, and then they'll want to do it, and it's kind of like dominoes. So I'm just excited to have you back on. So before I forget and we get into the conversation, because I know it's going to be good, take like a minute or however long, plug your website, your radio show, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and anything else you'd like to plug.
Okay, so first of all, I do have to apologize right off the bat. I live in Colorado, we probably have a lot of crossover audience, so some of your listeners know that I live in Colorado, but we have this new thing. Ever since marijuana was legalized, they have this thing called weed rape, where people, these gang members will run up to you like on the middle of the street and they'll blow hits of weed in your face, and it creates these contact highs, and pretty much everybody gets victimized by this. So it's a horrible, horrible thing about the legalization of marijuana here, but I fell victim to it myself right before the show, so I feel really, really bad, but I might be a little bit slow because some gang members attacked me with marijuana right before the show.
You feel victimized?
Yeah, yes.
You feel victimized, so you wanted to give your PSA before you.
I just in case there's some segments where I am looking for words and I can't find them. It's those hooligans' fault, and I just really feel bad for the listeners that are going to have to struggle through as I come to terms to what just happened with me.
Weed rape. I'm sure that'll be a new thing that the sheriffs will be trying to push.
No, it's totally self-inflicted. And yeah. So anyways, my website is Live Free FM. That's LIVEFREEFM, like frequency modulator. Like you mentioned, I do a radio broadcast right here on the Truth Frequency Radio Network on Sunday nights. And I archive maybe... pretty much all the shows are archived there, but I always add a little bit of extra content. Sometimes stuff that I wasn't able to fit into the show. Sometimes just extra things that I'd like the listeners to hear as they listen to my podcast, I guess. But I do that. I guess the main focus of the show is basically how to achieve personal freedom and societal freedom. And that means... to me, at least, it means understanding the philosophy of freedom, understanding what it's going to take to move towards a freer society, and what types of things we can do while we're still locked in this society where people still believe in the legitimized monopoly of violence to control each other, while people still believe that it's okay to build cages to put nonviolent people in, while people still believe it's okay to steal from each other as long as they do it through something that they believe is their representatives. As long as we're still living in this paradigm, the show focuses a lot on what we can do to live free our lives ourselves, and what we can do in our own lives to achieve more personal freedom in a very unfree world.
And you do a good job at what you do. I listen to your broadcast. I download the archives, throw them on my cell phone. There's a couple of shows on the network that I do that. I put them on my phone and on my MP3 player, and then when I'm out during the day, I'll listen to them. If it's in the early afternoon, if people aren't live, or if it's not, whenever anybody is live, and I have a tendency to tune into your broadcast. I actually, and I really do. I actually learn from the things that you talk about. It makes me think. That's one of the reasons I like listening to you, Nathan, is because just, even if say you or you might have a guest on and I might not fully agree with, and that rarely happens, but I'm just saying, even if I didn't agree, your show is the kind of show that makes me, like I can sit back and as you're talking, I'm like, wow, he's got a good point. What is true freedom? It makes you wonder about personal responsibility. That's always at least the number one thing to me that I find. If you want to be truly free, you have to take personal responsibility for everything in your life, and that includes your actions. That includes being able to admit when you're wrong about things, even if you don't like it. Nobody likes it, right? That makes me think of the Mark Passio, is a good friend of mine, and he's been on the broadcast before. And Mark calls the freedom movement the My Freedom movement, and he's right, because it's all about everybody's individual perspective of freedom. Or perception of freedom, but they really don't. I don't think anybody really has a true grasp of not anybody. There are small pockets, but I think a majority of people, including those who are trying to fight to wake others up, don't really fully grasp quite yet. And it doesn't mean they can't. It doesn't mean I'm making fun of them. I'm just saying I think there's a large swath that doesn't actually grasp what true freedom is. And I say that because, like Mark says, he calls it the My Freedom movement, because everybody is okay with their freedom, But if you have your freedom, maybe they don't believe what you believe, well, then it's different, and suddenly you shouldn't have the right to say that, or, they attack you for it or whatever. Even if they don't say you shouldn't have the right to say it, they'll attack you and jump all over you. And it's like, well, don't I have the freedom to speak my mind too? So it's really the my freedom movement. I think one of the basic steps is if everybody just realized that perhaps maybe we don't have quite all the answers yet, and maybe we still need to sit down and talk with one another rather than fight one another. And if people could learn how to debate, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. I also agree with the point that Mark makes about the My Freedom movement. I think a lot of times when people start waking up, you have to give people a little bit of time. Myself and you, we've been digging down these different rabbit holes for a very long time. A lot of people are just starting to wake up and realize that there's something rotten in Denmark. We've kind of gone through, and it can be frustrating watching people repeat the same steps, and it's even painful sometimes because you have to remember yourself when you were like, oh yeah, I remember when I still believed that. But it really comes down to when you really start grasping it, everybody starts waking up to all these problems. And in my opinion, I think that what is at the root core of all of these problems is that people are insecure about themselves, but also about the rest of humanity. And when it comes to this My Freedom movement, a lot of people that even wake up into the truth movement or whatever, I really hate using that word, but or that combination of words, but for lack of a better term, when people start waking up to these things, they start to realize how much their freedom is being impeded upon. But they don't realize, they start thrashing and wanting to wake people up and wanting to get their freedom back. But they don't realize, or maybe it's something that's too scary for them to actually face. We're never going to have personal autonomous freedom of any individual until we can evolve to the point where we realize that I can't be free unless you're free. And you can't be free unless I get rid of my lust to control you. And because I'm insecure about what that might lead to, I'm afraid if I don't have some sort of system to control you, to make you pay for the things that I want, to make you follow the moral guidelines that I hold valuable for my own life, if I get rid of that tool that allows me to do it, because I want to be free, so I need to let you be free, so I need to get rid of that tool that allows us to control each other in society. A lot of people are terrified of what that will actually lead to. And so a lot of what I do is giving people a clear idea of what that will actually lead to and why it's more beneficial, more practical, and will lead to a more prosperous society than what we currently have.
Well, that's one of the reasons I do the shows on logical fallacies. And I cover that stuff because I think that's one of those basics that if people could just understand, not even having like a PhD degree in it, you know what I mean? Just having that basic understanding of it. I mean, and I urge people to continue and further your own education on all these subjects. But like, if I do, logical fallacies, like I did I've done a bunch of shows on it, and I did two of them where I did logical fallacies 101 and then logical fallacies 201, where it was like the next step. And I pointed out as many as I can, so that way, to me, it's like giving the listeners a day pack, or like a 3-day pack and some ammunition and, maybe a Glock or a Sig Sauer or maybe even a rifle or a shotgun. You know what I mean? Like I'm sending you out on patrol for a couple days, and I need to give you the proper ammo in order to go out on patrol. You know what I mean? Like I can't expect people to be able to cut through the matrix themselves. Unless they have the same toolkit, kind of levels the playing field. And I think understanding some of these basic things, when people come at you in your everyday life, like I know you've seen it, I have as well. Once you understand this stuff, like all of a sudden you realize, oh my God, I am surrounded by this. No wonder we can't make a realistic, decision, and people are always overthinking stuff or panicked about things or having anxiety. No wonder the world is the way it is today, because you start to realize that not only do the powers that shouldn't be use logical fallacies against us to get away with the things that they do, and their minions do it, but they've actually programmed us into doing it to ourselves in our own personal lives, and that's why this matrix continues. Part of the awakening process is being able to have a conversation with somebody, and instead of getting sucked into the false argument, instead of getting dragged in by a red herring statement or something, you go, wait, no, that doesn't hold up. That doesn't hold any water. And you point out why why it doesn't hold any water and what they're doing. And then you point to them. You have to. I mean, it makes you sound like an arrogant prick, but I think we have to do this because we have to take our logic back. We have to take our way of thinking back. Wouldn't you say the same thing?
Yeah, and also one thing that learning the logical fallacies, and I commend those episodes that you've done. I contacted you after I listened to them because I was like, these are such great episodes. I just wanted to let you know how much I enjoyed those episodes. But I think that realistically, and this is something that I see differently than probably 90% of people, and especially the powers that be or shouldn't be, a lot of people see humanity as like just this stupid, manipulatable disease. Even like a lot of people look at humanity as the cancer on earth, and I look at humanity as a very beautiful, inspiring creation. That yes, we've got our flaws, yes, we have things that we need to work on, but as a whole, I see society and humanity as very beautiful and intelligent. And once you start looking into like things like Prussian education and how the education system is deliberately set up to create, I mean, you go to school and it destroys your desire to learn. It teaches you how to conform. It teaches you that there's classes of people that have, some people are authority and they have rights that you don't have, and that translates into society later on in life. It teaches you things about class presidents, and it teaches you to worship and beg for more of your own enslavement. But if people are taught things like the logical fallacies, if people are taught how to run things through a logical fallacy filter before they make a decision on them, if people are taught things like how to communicate in nonviolent, non-coercive, non-power over ways, if people are taught to communicate in win-win ways where the result of the debate or the result of the argument or the result of the negotiation is to bring both parties to a situation where they feel more fulfilled than they did going in, if people are taught these very simple things in life, their own lives, and I've seen this in my own life, I am assuming that you've seen it in yours, your own life can start to turn around and you can start to take back a lot more power over your life. And I see humanity as a very beautiful arrangement of sentient beings that have been stripped of one of the things that makes them their most beautiful, and that's their individuality, their personalities, and their intelligence. And I think that if instead of fearing what would happen if people got their autonomy back, instead of fearing what would happen if people gave up the lust to control each other and embrace their own intellect, I think that these are things that should be strived for, worked towards, and even celebrated.
Agreed. I don't think humanity is a bug that needs to be squashed at all. I really, that's really well said. If you look at the people that actually believe that, and I don't mean the elitists, not the powers that shouldn't be, or these Illuminati, whatever you freaking want to call them, not them. The general public that says stupid statements like that, I look at them and I used to like want to fight with these people, and I used to want to argue, and now I understand why they think like that. Like it took me years of researching this. Even when I got into this whole thing of doing Federal Jack and then my radio show, there was a part of me that couldn't comprehend how they could think like that. Like, you're the one they're talking about. Like, how are you thinking like that? And then I realized, once you understand, I guess it was just, over the course of time of understanding everything, you have to have an understanding of a lot of stuff to come to some of these key things. And understanding, that humans are like biological computers, I realized why the general public or people in the general public will have that outlook. And there are some people that might be negative or they had a bad experience, but for the most part, most of that is bad programming and it's bad code that was put into them. And it's from these people, the powers that shouldn't be. They've gotten society to think about themselves the way that the powers that shouldn't be think about them. So like if you and I were the powers that shouldn't be and we thought everybody else were sheep, right? What better of a way for us to control everybody, right, than to get everybody to think that they're sheep, right? You get them to actually think that they're stupid and that they're garbage and that they're filth and everything else. If you can actually get them to actually think about themselves the way you think about them, they'll police themselves, and it's more efficient. And you're less likely to have people rebel, or at least less people will be rebelling against what they know that there will always be somebody that rebels. I think that's inside of humanity's DNA itself. But it's a way to control the populace as a whole, and that's what they've gotten people to hate themselves. I mean, you hear people, I hate humanity. No, humanity's beautiful. We have to stop hating ourselves and hating each other. That's one of the planet's biggest problems right now is this level of hate. And by the way, I've said this before, the universe does not operate on love and hate. It operates on love and fear. Those are the two frequencies. Hate comes from fear, okay? And they use the fear of whatever and then old school stories and traditions to pump everybody up to fight each other. And for what?
Something that I would like to add, and this brings it down to a level where anybody can recognize it. When it comes to like abusive relationships, in order for someone to stay in an abusive relationship, there's a lot of factors, but one of them that always has to be there is that the person that's being abused has to have low self-esteem. They have to hate themselves. When it came to slavery or any other kind of indentured servitude, you have to train the people to hate themselves, to hate their nature, to hate, to not have any self-esteem. Otherwise, they'll demand better than what you give them. And when it comes to like an abusive relationship, if the male or the female, whichever one's being abused, once that person starts building their self-esteem, once that person starts realizing that they're more valuable than what they're receiving, or they're worth more than what they're receiving, once that person doesn't hate themselves anymore, they're capable of breaking that cycle. And that's one of the things that I think that is probably the most detrimental thing is they teach us to hate ourselves. They teach us to hate our neighbors. They teach us to hate our humanity. And the one thing that they teach us to love is our nationalism and everything else. So, I mean, we can hate our neighbors. We can hate people in brown skin and towel heads on the other side of the planet, but we have to love our flag. And that's really the only thing they teach us to love. And that's a way to teach the slaves to hate themselves but love the plantation, and that's it's one of their biggest tools. And that's why I really love the motto of this network in general is spreading hope and spreading love. And that's really, you can boycott the Federal Reserve all day, you can hand out pamphlets about how horrible the government is all day. Until we start loving ourselves and having self-esteem, we're not going to believe that we deserve more than what we have.
Well said. I've said it 1,000 times myself. That's why I did back, I think it was 4/25, I think was the date of this year, April 25th. I did a show called Bridging the Human Divide, I think was the title I did. And I was just trying to talk about loving each other again and loving ourselves. That you can't even start to love somebody else until you can love yourself first. That's what everything starts with ourselves. That's why I've done numerous shows about this. I'm glad you're on the same page. And so many others are as well, because that's the real solution. Running around and picketing and screaming and stuff's not going to do anything. The real change has to come from within. Mm-hmm. Once we all start doing it ourselves, as above, so below, like the law of correspondence says. That's why the Masons adopted that motto, in the micro, in the macro. So if we change within, you will change your life, outwardly. And then by projecting that change out into the universe, you're automatically, by default, changing the universe. You're changing the code. Because now you're not putting out bad code. You're not putting out that fear frequency. You're changing up. You're unplugging.
And whether it's on an astrological field or a metaphysical or spiritual field, or whether it's just the way that human interactions work, whatever the reasoning is for it, it is that way. And it makes you realize how insignificant we are in the universe, even though we're constantly taught that we're just insignificant. Our lives mean nothing, but that is not the truth.
Well, that's why they have to get us to believe that. So that way, if we believe that we're easily controlled, right? Because if we think that we're insignificant nothings and that we're garbage, I mean, look how easily the cops will attack or beat somebody down. And what do they say? Well, they're scum. We're at a war with scum. And people go, oh my God, it's the cop, it's the training. Yes, to a certain degree, there is personal responsibility. There's responsibility of the people training him. But we're at a very base level. Where does that mentality come from? That's how we beat it. You can retrain the cop all you want. You can tell him no, suspend him, smack his hands. It's not going to stop him. Maybe he'll be abusive to his wife. Maybe he'll be abusive to other people in his personal life. You have to stop the mentality that created that. It's this very base level of thinking. And we'll get into this because the break is sneaking up on us on the other side. But there's a show I did with Passio that I've hearkened back to this one image from the show when I think of base level consciousness, and that's what they're doing. They're keeping everybody at this very base level because it's via fear, via multiple ways, just so it's easy to control us. Because they don't want us getting together. Because they realize, what do you think? They fear the internet, ladies and gentlemen. That's why they want to shut it down. It's not about, what website you go to see. It's about methods of communication, free flow of information that they're scared of. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So, we got cut off. Nathan and I were talking about the internet and how it's a free form of, free flow of communication. That's why, for my research has shown me over the years that the internet, yes, they wanted to use it to surveil us and monitor us, but they were very surprised and they underestimated the power of the internet, they being the powers that shouldn't be, at least the older generations. They underestimated the internet till about 2008. That's when the younger generations brought it to their attention and said, you have no idea what you're missing and what's going on and the damage that could be done to you, the younger generations on their side, because they were getting hammered. Because they used to not pay attention on the internet, whatever. It's really more of a tool for us to monitor them. But what did the stupid sheep do, Nathan? We weren't so stupid after all. See, that's why, ladies and gentlemen, Nathan says it, I say it, Chris Gio says it, Joe Joseph says it, Kev Baker says it, Mark Passio says it, all these other great people that are out there that, and forward thinkers, they all say the same thing. Humanity, you're not stupid and you're not garbage, okay? Look at this. You want to break this down to something very simple, not occulted information or anything like that, not hidden, because that's what occulted means, not something deep or very philosophical. I'll break it down in very layman's terms for the people that maybe can't think that deep. Maybe they're in Nathan's state. Maybe somebody attacked them with a cloud of cannabis smoke, or maybe they've had a few, and maybe whatever. I'll break it down into very simple, easy to understand terms. We're in an abusive relationship. The government is the abuser, and we're the abused wife. Okay? Well, we'll put it in terms of that. Okay? I'm not trying to be sexist or anything like that and try to pick man over women and divide anything. I'm just using as an example. Okay? We are in an abusive relationship. The government, the powers that, not even the government, the powers that shouldn't be, because the government's a tool, they have control of the government. So it's like having control of a car. Okay, we're in an abusive relationship. They beat the crap out of us. Right? They underestimate us, and they call us stupid. And they get us to actually think that. And anytime we start to have a little bit of self-confidence, that scares the crap out of them, and they have to smack that right out of us. That's what they do. Okay? Because your true power scares them. Why? Because you are 1,000 times more powerful than they are. You just don't realize it. They're like bullies. They have to get you to believe what they say. Otherwise, they don't have any power over you. What happens when you stand up to a bully and you're like, you know what, I'm not afraid of you anymore? What, is he going to take a swing at you? Good. You dodge the swing, and then you knock 3 or 4 of his teeth out of his face. Hit him a couple times in the jaw. Maybe you shatter his jaw. Maybe you break his nose. Betcha he won't bully you anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah, unfortunately, most examples throughout history where people stand up and knock the bully's teeth out, they immediately turn around and start begging for another bully. So,
well, that's what people need to realize. And even if we don't physically knock the bully's teeth out, if you just do, the best way to do it, because honestly, that's a cycle. I've actually talked about this. Joe and I were talking about this one night.
What, you mean a revolution is part of a cycle?
Yeah, well, actually, a revolution, if you look at it in terms of like an engineer would,
it is a cycle.
Exactly. Like if you were taking apart a car, if you were an auto mechanic, you would look into you would use the term revolution to like how many revolutions, one full revolution of the crankshaft going fully around, and your engine going through one complete cycle. The piston going through all 4 stages of one complete cycle. That's a full revolution. There's many different. There's 4 different things going on there at once. But in the end, it's one full revolution. So that's what we go through. A bunch of different things that appear to be not connected. But when you look at history from taking 5, 10 steps back, you see it's just this cycle, this revolution. So having another revolution will do nothing. Okay, we'll just bring in more. I honestly think it would bring in more garbage than it would anything else. The only way to get out of this is to step out of this and say, whoa, we're just repeating this cycle. We need to stop. What are we doing? We need to change the way we think. What did Einstein say? And I know that when I use this quote, there's always inevitably somebody that emails me and says, well, Einstein was talking about a world government. It doesn't mean you can't take their thinking or their tools and use it against the bad, right? Knowledge and information and philosophy really is only information. It's how you act on it, what you do with it. So as Einstein used to say, you cannot solve a problem with the same level of thinking that created it. So if we stay in this cycle, dude, we're just going to continue. Revolutions are not the way to do it. That's why they want us, the powers that shouldn't be, want us to have a bloody revolution. They have the FEMA camps. They have whatever, their little cops. That's why they're almost pushing for a civil war. They're pushing for a bloody fight because it's the only outcome that they can control. If everybody just stood up and said, you know what, you're irrelevant, F off, that's it. They would, literally, poof. All of their power would disappear in the blink of an eye, and they would be nothing. And that's what they're afraid of, because if we just step away from the board game, stop playing Monopoly, as it were, they're done. They only have power because we're at the board, and they're playing Monopoly, and they're banker, so to say.
Well, to take it back to your abused woman syndrome, battered wife syndrome analogy, the worst thing that can happen for an abusive husband is not for the wife to knock his teeth out. The worst thing that can happen is for the wife to realize she doesn't even need him. And that's a very hard thing for people to do, especially if their grandpa and their great-grandpa and their dad and their mom and everybody they know grew up telling them how great the abuser is, and your great-grandpa died fighting for the abuser so that you could be free. It's real hard for people to really realize, hey, maybe I'd be better off if I was single.
Exactly. That's why I use that analogy, because it's like we have Stockholm Syndrome on a mass scale. It's like we sympathize with the abuser. And
we adore the abuser.
And that's forced down our throats too. You have to. Again, this is why I say humanity. People go, well, see, that just shows humanity's dumb. No, it's the fact that you can attest to humanity's intelligence by the fact that if you look at the amount of money that they have to spend on a daily basis to actually keep you stupefied.
Right.
They have to constantly come up with new ways to keep you dumbed down, because humanity it's like we're like marathon runners, and we keep jumping over the hurdles, and they keep throwing things in our path, and we keep leaping over them, and they're like, now they're throwing flaming tires in our path instead of just hurdles because it's pissing them off. And somehow yet we seem to overcome it. So just watching the news, watching how much money is put into the propaganda itself, because you could attack the propaganda. Sometimes I tear apart a piece they do here or there, and I do so to point out the logical fallacies used, as a twofold thing. One, to rip it apart and one to kind of use it as an educational tool so others can see, almost like, hey, look, another lesson on logical fallacies, but it's also a woodshedding. But the media as a whole, without even getting into like each little case here or there, that whole thing, if you look at it on a daily basis, how much money they spend to keep people baffled by BS, it's just utterly astonishing. So to me, that doesn't show that humanity is completely dumbed down and we're stupid. It shows that they have to keep this constant pressure on humanity like a lid on a pot. Otherwise, poof, the lid's going to come off. And they have to keep applying more pressure, and they can't take their eye off of it. It used to be that they could just throw the lid on, walk away, go do whatever, go have a scotch. They can't do that anymore. The frogs are pushing the lid out of the pot. We're like, we're done. We want out. Now they got people holding the pot down. There's two chefs holding the lid of the pot on top, and they have to do that because no matter what, I see that we're on this path of where, again, bringing up Mark again, we've talked about in the past where we've talked about where the universe, goes through cycles of enlightenment, 8 periods, whatever. And there'll come a time, and it's happened in the past where humanity had this chance to evolve. And I think we're at this point in history, again, whatever you want to call it, in time, whatever, even though time's kind of relative according to quantum physics. Everything's actually going on at once, the past, present, and future. But whatever, where we are right now, this projection we're living in, right? This matrix this movie that we live in. I believe that the universe is giving us a chance to evolve. It's also a crossroads. We either evolve or we don't. But if we don't, it's gonna. If we think things are bad now, it's only going to get worse because they want to go back. The people that are in control of the car right now, so to speak, the powers that shouldn't be. They want to go back to the way things were, where it's like neo-feudalism. That's basically what they want to do, and with a technological twist, and they want to control humanity for another however long this cycle would take, because they are terrified. Their own fear, their own fears that they live and they actually think about. See, this is what keeps these people up at night. Okay, is them not being relevant anymore. You could talk about money or power. It's all about them not being relevant, no matter what. And if they lose that, that's their biggest fear. So they don't want to face that. So they're just scrambling at any little thing that they can grab to control humanity. I mean, any little thing.
So I kind of equate our modern rulers to like a priest class of an old theocracy or a religion-based government. And I actually kind of see the state as a deity itself. But you can look in the past at different points in time where one particular god died, and the priests that were the high leadership of the belief system based upon that god, they fought it tooth and nail as that god died. But it didn't change the fact that that god died. And history is ripe with examples of once people stop believing the promises that the priest class spews about how their god can fix all of the problems, once the people realize that it's just a con game so that the priest class can have power over them, then they tend to lose the belief. And I think that we're at a point where, especially to bring it back to the communications thing, every time we have a leap forward in communications, we have a massive leap forward in society and intelligence overall. Once people were able to, at one point all we were able to do was grunt and make facial expressions, and we were pretty primitive. But once we developed categorization, how to categorize sounds in association with items or actions, and we started developing language, we were able to share things, we were able to share ideas, and society jumped forward. And once we were able to write those down and people could take them outside of the village and take them to another village and explain them there, and we had books that could go from one place to another and knowledge could be shared from one community to another, we had society jump forward by leaps and bounds again, and the old superstitions die off. And we're at that point right now. A lot of us don't realize how significant the time period we live in right now is, but the internet is like the old Gutenberg press and what it did to the powers that be back then. Once the press was able to be set up in somebody's house and they could start printing out their own news, that destroyed so much ignorance, and it created as a system where people could communicate on a level that took society forward by leaps and bounds. And now we're at that point again with the internet, where anybody can put their thoughts out there for almost anybody else in the entire world, or at least on the entire planet, to grab those thoughts and run with and shoot their thoughts back. And you can have communications like we're having right now, or you can have communications on forums. And what we're witnessing is the very beginning stages of another massive leap forward. And typically when these leap forwards happen, old superstitions, old power systems tend to fall apart and die and wither on the vine. And I'm very hopeful that because of the work that I'm doing, because of the work that you're doing, because of the work that a lot of people are doing right now, I'm very hopeful that we're at the point where we're going to watch this current superstition, this current belief system where people believe that we have to use force and violence against each other in order to have a peaceful society. I'm very hopeful that that superstition is about to fall away, and I keep seeing more and more evidence of it every day.
And a lot of people mistake when you say, not use force. People go, oh, well, you just get punched in the face and be a pussy and take a shot to the jaw. No, there's a difference between self-defense and violence. Okay? Self-defense, if someone is committing violence against you, you're defending yourself from said violence. If I walk up to Nathan and he pulls out a knife and tries to stab me and I break his wrist because he tried to stab me, well, that was me defending myself. But if I walk up and just grab Nathan by the wrist and break his wrist just because I'm being a prick, that's violence. There's a distinct difference because I tried to violate his personal space, his personal freedom, and his person itself.
Yeah, and what it really comes down to is force itself is not bad, but force to control other people is bad. And as long as, and that's just basic, everybody knows that. Nobody wants to have it used against them. So
think about the logic that's not used when people say, if you break it down, when people go, well, I think, and again, government, this isn't well, what do you want, just total nothing? Well, you could have a structure without having government. Government, the word is actually two Latin words, a verb and a noun, and it means to control the mind, literally. So do we need mind control? No. Do we need 80 bazillion levels of bureaucracy? Can we have some sort of structure or framework that everybody can agree upon so that, we don't murder one another and we can have a civilized society? Of course. Can we have some sort of structure that would enable us to take care of things like fires and roads and if people were injured by a natural disaster? Of course. And there'd be a lot of money for it, too, if we weren't spending it all on rockets to kill one another. 2014, dude, and, when I was a kid, I was like, wow, humanity's going to be awesome. We're going to live in this, so technologically advanced society when I grow up. And now I'm here as a grown-up, and I'm like, wow, 2014, and all we did was spend money to kill one another.
Yeah, well, that's because of one giant flaw in most people's thinking, and that's the idea that in order to have a peaceful society, we have to be ran by the most violent psychopaths out there, and we have to legitimize their violent psychopathy and say, oh, no, that's not violent psychopathy. They're representing me. And I don't know. They're really not. I don't want to go kill people on the other side of the ocean. I don't want to kill my neighbors. I don't want to lock people up in jail for smoking things that I disagree with. I don't want to do 99% of the stuff that the government does. I don't want to do it, so they're not representing me. And the 2 or 3% of the things that they do that I do want to do, I would gladly pay somebody voluntarily to handle those things for me.
Yeah, look. You don't need the government to build roads. That's the oldest argument in the book, right? You don't need them to handle things for you. Case in point, Joe Joseph, one of the hosts here at the network, friend of ours, where he lives, the county doesn't even come out and plow the roads where he lives. So until he gets out to a certain section, the people that live there are responsible for it, and there's only certain sections where the people actually plow it. Now his road, his neighbor has a bulldozer, so it starts snowing. They wait till it finishes snowing, and the neighbor just comes out and bulldozes, and anybody that's got a plow just plows out their driveway, right? And if they have a plow, they can plow whatever they have to in the area around there. So it's not really that big of a deal for them. But they all maintain their own road. The road his house is on, the county doesn't come down and salt. The county doesn't come down and plow. If there's a pothole, they don't come down and fix it. If there's a pothole, his neighbor's got a backhoe, literally a backhoe and a bulldozer, and I believe he's got a pile of quarry process and sand somewhere on his property. Basically, because they have like 10, 15 acres out there. So that's the size of the lots out off of the street, and it's out in the middle of the woods. So he's got plenty of room that if they need to patch one of the road, they get a pothole. Springtime. They've been moving snow around, and the water freezes, expands. Moves the dirt around, and then it melts, and then they have a big hole, and water gets in there and makes it even bigger. Well, they just go out there. They patch. They say, "Oh, look, this is going to cause damage to our vehicles." They go out there with the backhoe. They throw the quarry process and the sand mix, whatever, in there. Pat it down. Done. The government had nothing to do with any of that. They didn't plow. They didn't fix the roads. They didn't pay them to put the stuff on the property and store the sand in the quarry process there. They didn't give them the backhoe and the bulldozer. They took care of this all on their own. Now, people would go, well, I can't afford that. Not on your own. But if everybody on the block, if everybody in your community came together and took care of one another, there wouldn't be problems. You'd have more security, And
the thing is, you mentioned 2 or 3 things that I really want to emphasize. Number one, it's in their best interest to fill up those potholes. Therefore, they filled up the potholes. When government wasn't there to steal from all their neighbors to do it, they realized, hey, we need to do this, and it got done. It's not like the pothole just turned into a sinkhole and dragged everybody's house into it like the propaganda makes you think that it would. Also, the other thing is, nowadays, with things like Kickstarter, with things like GoFundMe, there was an incident in Oakland where the police department refuses to go to a particular neighborhood in Oakland. So that neighborhood decided to do a Kickstarter to get a bunch of funds together so that they could pay a private security agency to send some of their guys to patrol the neighborhood at night and make sure that people weren't getting robbed, make sure that people weren't getting raped on the street corners, stuff like that. They were able, in like 3 days, they were able to raise enough money for 6 months worth of service. So this concept that if we don't have this tool that allows us to rob each other in order to pay for the things that we need, that will just go without the things we need. Both the example of the pothole and the example of this private security agency that these people in Oakland were able to acquire, both of those examples fly in the face of the propaganda that without government, everything would just fall apart and degrade into chaos and anarchy, because the reality of the situation is human beings are self-serving, and it's in all of our best interest to live in a peaceful, prosperous society. And right now, the most anti-peace and anti-prosperous organization out there, the government, that steals all of our wealth and uses it to buy weapons of war. You can't get more anti-peace and anti-prosperous than that. We think that we need that organization to rule over society in order to have peace and prosperity.
Well, again, Stockholm Syndrome.
Yeah, it's insane.
We identify with our abusers. We wouldn't want that force used against our own loved ones, but yet there are people out there that will be like, well, it's justified in this case because this guy was a bad guy. I did a show about 2 weeks ago on talking about the second hour. I was talking about the out-of-control cops down here in Florida when it comes to shootings. And in the past 25 years, every police-involved shooting has been ruled justified. Which, by the way, includes that shooting with like 30 cops down in South Beach a couple of years ago during Memorial Day weekend where they were hitting just bystanders because they were just firing all over the place. That was ruled justified too. They shot innocent people. That was ruled justified. Okay, think about that for a minute. So, obviously, they can't all be justified. One of the cases that I highlighted that I talked about were these home invaders. I think there were 3 or 4 of them. At least one of them that I know of, because they had some undercover image video from when one of the guys that they had killed was their own informant. That this whole thing was a setup. He had set them up to go to this house that the county owned, and they were using it as a sting. And then when they went to do the home invasion, SWAT came in and they killed all of them, including their own police informant. And one of the guys was that you see it on the infrared camera. He had no weapons on him. He had tossed his gun, and he's laying under a tree cowering. And it was 3 or 4 cops with rifles come up and just unload on him. I think it was 51 rounds they fired into this guy. He was just those high velocity rounds that he must have, in the wound pockets they create. This guy must have just been jello when they were done with him. And he was a bad guy. Don't get me wrong. This guy was a bad dude. He was talking about, that he wouldn't have a problem shooting a homeowner because they probably wouldn't have a problem shooting you. So you got to make sure you kill the homeowner and all this other stuff. This guy was a bad dude, but I could not, I could not figure and think of a better example to use to show of police brutality. And people go, well, but Popeye, he was a scumbag. You're right. And if he broke into my house, I would have shot him and killed him without a shadow of a doubt. But I have to defend his right to be a human and not be executed mercilessly like that, because he wasn't firing at the cops. If he had a gun and he took at least one shot at the cops, or he had a knife and threw it at the cops, or he threw a rock at them, well, then he did some sort of action towards them. I could at least say, well, he shouldn't have done that, right? But this guy was underneath the tree carrying, and they thought he was reaching for a gun. How many times have we heard that? And they executed him. Now, although I despise him as a human being, and like I said, if the guy broke into my house, I'd shoot him dead. Okay, I can't say it's okay for what they did in that occasion because he's a quote-unquote bad guy. Because what happens when they move the goalposts and you become a bad guy for something that you said or something that you believe in? So even if I think this person's a vile piece of garbage, I have to stand up for what's actually right, whether or not I agree with them as a human being. Again, if they were in the process of hurting somebody, or if they were in the process of pulling a gun on the cops, and they've all got rifles on them, well, then he's an idiot. And then then technically it's self-defense because he was going to take one of them out, so they opened fire on him. But that wasn't the case. Now they can say all they want that that's what they thought, but it was 3 or 4 of them shooting this guy 51 times. So again, even if we don't like or agree with things, we have to stand up for what's right, because again, when they move the goalposts, your freedom can suddenly be taken away. It's not the My Freedom movement, it's the freedom movement in general. And in a free society, sometimes bad things happen, and that's why we have to use common sense approaches to things, not fear approach where you scare the crap out of everybody and try to create a police state in this false sense of security, which will not really happen anyway. Nathan, I'm going to pause this because the top of the hour break sneaking up. Ladies and gentlemen, do not go anywhere. We will be right back. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye, from federaljack.com. Hanging out with me tonight is my good friend Nathan Fraser. Go check his broadcast out, Live Free FM. Nathan, plug all your stuff again. Plug the show, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, anything else. Go.
You can check out the website. That's livefreefm.com. And actually, I have links on the top header section of that site to the YouTube, to the Facebook, to the Twitter account. So it's usually better just to go there, and then you can go anywhere that you want from there. And if I could put a bug in the listener's ear, there's an RSS feed and there's an iTunes feed. And hopefully coming soon, I'll have a Stitcher feed. So if you want to check out, I kind of do shows like Popeye does. I do shows where the main point is to educate people. And so if you're somebody who enjoys the type of work that Popeye puts in, there's a very high probability that you'll get a lot out of my work as well. I I don't know if it was on air during the break, but Popeye and I seem to cross paths a lot. And a lot of times when I see Popeye doing a show, it's a idea that I was working on for a show, or it's an idea that I just accomplished a show on. So a lot of times there's this unintentional crossover between what me and Popeye do. So if you enjoy Down the Rabbit Hole, I would really recommend, or even I'm begging you to go to livefreefm.com and check out some of the archives, and I guarantee that you will not be disappointed.
I guarantee it as well. I mean, I listen to your show. Again, like you said, there are times I'll be, just like you, I'll be working on something and I'll see something that you post, and I'm like, look at that. Great minds think alike. And it's this, because it sticks out to me amongst the other stuff. Because like you said, there's so many people that are still very intelligent, forward-thinking individuals, but they just don't quite get it just yet. They still kind of, they escape one train of thinking, or they think they escape a train of thought, only to get sucked into the very same train of thought, but under the guise of a new savior, and that's okay. When in reality, they should be looking to themselves for the savior. Don't try to follow a politician, a filmmaker, a radio show host, a personality. None of that. Be that person yourself. Instead of trying to be someone's huge fan, or groupie or whatever, or repeating exactly what someone says, you should be challenged by that. Like, I don't want the listeners to ever think what I say is gospel and just go with it because Popeye said it. No, you're defeating the purpose of tuning into my broadcast. I want you to be like, no way, and then go research it yourself, and then you'll be like, oh, wow. Like, holy crap, like, oh, okay, maybe he's got a point. And maybe you still won't fully agree with me, but and I don't expect you to. And I respect if you don't. But at least you'll have taken the 5 minutes to look outside the box. And you know what that does, even if you don't realize it? That'll cause you to think outside the box again in the future. So I've done my job. I've gotten you to, think that there's more, or realize that there's more options than A or B. Because that's really one of the things that they give you is this, and they, and the powers that shouldn't be. They've programmed society to always think that when it comes to a problem, and we do it to ourselves too. Again, it's this bad code that they've put into us. When it comes to a problem, Nathan, there's only A or B can be the solution, right? You can't have any more than two options to solve the issue. Really? Why do we do that to ourselves? Think about that for a second. I mean, that's kind of deep. I know it doesn't sound like it, but if we just think about that again, this base level of thinking, like I was talking about in the first hour. When Passio and I did the occult aspects of 9/11 show, just go on federaljack.com and type in the occult aspects of 9/11. It'll come up. I urge you to listen to the broadcast. But in there's this image, and it shows. And I forget where Mark got it, but it's an image from the Freemasons, and it shows the checkerboard floor, which the checkerboard floor represents base consciousness, the base level of thinking. And then you see this ladder going up to what in the picture is like depicted as like in the clouds or like heaven, enlightenment, right? That's where the light is. And that's what them learning this hidden knowledge, this occulted information, that's what the ladder represents, is going up. The ladder is, you're being enlightened. And mankind is on that base level of consciousness, and they've gotten us through this bad code. They have to keep us down there. They're afraid of us coming up the ladder as well. So they get us to all think on this base level of thinking. That's why the cops act the way they do. That's why, everybody's, now people are starting to get a little war weary, but that's where the let's go fight and kill and die and blah, 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 all that comes from. It plays off of the reptilian brain, right, which is actually a very real thing, a part of our actual human brain, but it's this base level of consciousness, and that they keep humanity at that level on so many ways, whether it be just through fear, scaring the crap out of them, or putting even to the ingenious level of putting the code inside of us and getting us to then program the code to our next generations, which is what parents do. The parents program their children with the fears and anxiety and whatever, the bad programming that they've been programmed with, and they pass that on. And I mean, for people to say that these people don't think, they do. I mean, they're not stupid. That's a genius level of thinking right there, is, getting humanity to actually do that to themselves. But again, not all of them are that intelligent, but the people at the very tippy top, it shows that they're intelligent. But it also shows, again, that so is humanity, that they have to go to that level to manipulate you. I mean, if they have to go through that many hoops to screw with your mind, think about it. You're not stupid by any means. It just goes to show you that, wow, when it comes to brain power, maybe the human brain is kind of like the special forces, right? Maybe we're a lot better equipped than we realize. We just don't know it. It makes me think of that movie that just came out about transhumanism, Lucy, where they make Scarlett Johansson's brain. I guess she gets like full function capability of her brain, and she starts to be able to do things like change her hair color and length. At thought. Who knows? I mean, understanding how quantum physics works and that, our thoughts can shape our reality.
Nobody understands how quantum physics
Well, you know
works.
what I mean. Well, having a basic understanding of what quantum physics is as we know it now, I should say, right?
Yeah.
Or the understanding we have of it now, even having a base level of understanding of it, what I mean by that is like that thoughts control our reality, right? If
thoughts heavily influence our reality, I'll give you that much.
Well, and that's it. And now, if you buy into the we only use like 10% of our brain theory, can you imagine if we used 100%? If the thoughts could actually literally form reality? I mean,
see, I think that's a misconception though, because if they do like mind maps, they do brain maps now where they can see humans use almost all of their brain. We just don't use it all at the same time. We use different sections of our brains for different tasks, different emotions, different thoughts and actions, but we use the majority of our brain. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I've seen some weird stuff. I've seen stuff that makes me think that there is psychic ability. There is more than just what our five senses can our senses can detect. I think there is more to it, but I think we use a pretty well, at least present company included. I think we use a pretty good proportion or percentage of our brain.
Well, it makes you wonder: is that notion that we only most people, right? And when they say most people, they're referencing humanity as in general. Most people only use like 10% of their brain, and that's why I said if you buy into that notion, is that maybe put out there to keep again humanity thinking that we're stupid, and that we only use 10% of our brain, and that we really are dunces, holy crap! I mean, scientists have just told us that we're stupid, and they must be really smart. I bet you they use more than 10% of their brain, so we should listen to what they have to say. And then the same guy will be like, it'd be like Michio Kaku, and if you don't want a one world government, you're a terrorist. Yeah, and you're like, what? Wait, you're a theoretical physicist. When did you start getting into geopolitics? Hold up.
When the CIA started handing him scripts.
Right. This is the same guy that pushed the alien invasion crap when it was being hyped a couple of years ago, remember?
Yeah.
The aliens are going to come here and they are going to take over. And we, humanity, can do nothing. First of all, anybody that thinks about it deeply on a philosophical level would look at it and go, why would an advanced species from another planet that's way more advanced than us, why would they want to come here? So they could subjugate us and turn us into slaves. Well, now you're thinking like a human. That's very base level consciousness. If they're evolved enough to be able to fly around in spacecraft and all this other stuff, maybe they don't do that. And I mean, maybe they would, but why would they want to? How would they benefit? Well, they want to plunder the planet. Really? How are they going to plunder the planet? They would have to make all of us slaves. Exactly. Okay, wouldn't it be easier just to go to many of the other planets that are out there that have some of the same makeup of Earth that don't have anybody on them, supposedly? That they could go to planets out there in the vast, universe that's out there, the multiverse, if you will, and they could go to any of numerous uninhabited planets and get what they need. Why would they only come to Earth to fight humanity? Why? Just think about it logically for a second. Why? It just doesn't make sense. Like, when you start to think about it without the fear and emotion, you turn that off. You're like, kind of sounds like crap. Why would Michio Kaku, a theoretical physicist, be pushing that? Who signs his paychecks, Nathan?
Discovery Channel?
Yeah, and again, who's behind Discovery and all them?
Yeah, exactly. One of like 3 giant corporations that control almost everything that you are able to build your paradigm off of.
It just sickens me, dude. It sickens me to see the propaganda, but at the same time, I mean, I don't have cable, and I can't watch TV anymore, even in public places. But at the same time, it's good because so many more people are seeing it now. I mean, back a couple years ago, if I had said that quote about Michio Kaku, people would have been like, what are you talking about? So many more people now have seen. I even made one of my videos I made about it, back in, I think it was 2011 or 2012. It's got like 80 or 90,000 hits, and that was the end piece at the end where I pointed out how, look, Kaku, will call you a terrorist if you don't believe in a one world government. That doesn't mean I don't think that humanity can't get along, but like his idea of, well, we have to have a one world centralized government to control humanity because we're all a bunch of, mindless apes. I don't buy that. And if you're pushing that as a quote-unquote theoretical physicist, somebody that can think outside the box, like what Kool-Aid are you drinking?
Well, I think that either he's paid to say that or maybe he actually believes it. But to me, the flaw in that logic is that if you just examine what government really is, and we've hinted at this throughout the show, but government is the idea that in order to solve some problems in society, we have to use violence and theft. And to different degrees in different societies, they set the goalpost at different areas. A limited government society says, well, there's only a few really important problems. And then a total collectivist society is like, nope, everything has to be solved by the government. People put the goalposts different places, but really what it is a very primitive concept that in order to get laid, I have to club somebody over the head with this stick. That's a very primitive mindset. And that's what government represents, is that very primitive mindset that we can't work together. We can't come to a win-win solution. The only way this problem is going to be solved is that I'm going to use violence, men with guns, cages, and the ability to steal your money in order to accomplish solving this complicated problem. And to think that evolution from, I think that he said we're like a type 1 society moving to a type 2 society or type A moving to type B, to think that the evolution of mankind involves taking that very primitive concept from a local or a national level and making it global, taking the concept of, in order to get laid, it's okay for me to beat this woman over the head with a club. Taking that primitive problem-solving approach and saying that the next step forward in man's evolution is to apply it to a global mafia shows me right there that either he hasn't actually thought about what he's actually saying, or he has and he's getting a paycheck to deliberately mislead people. I don't know which one it is, but when I watched that clip, it made me lose what little bit of respect I had left for him in a heartbeat.
I think it's option number 2 myself, just because some of the things he says, like he's been asked about 9/11 and he's like, oh, these 9/11 truthers, they just don't use logic. They don't use any type of rational thinking. And it's like, wow, the first thing you attack is logic, and then you don't use any yourself, sir. You can't be, I don't want to hear, when it comes to that, and it's not because it's 9/11, it's because if you have a level of education that he does, and you actually look into, because he's like, I've looked into it, and there's no merit to any of these conspiracy theories. Well, if you actually looked into it, you would realize that there's more evidence for what the quote-unquote conspiracy theorists say happened. And I know it's kind of fractured right now when it comes to 9/11 about whether or not there were holograms and all this, but the idea, the central idea that the government's official story is a lie, okay, is easily proven. And anybody of his intelligence and his intellect would be able to understand that with doing 10 to 15 minutes of research. The problem is, if you get into investigating, I'm doing air quotes, like when I was a private investigator, if I was hired to do something, I kept myself neutral going in because that's how I got the best results for an investigation. If I went into an investigation with a predetermined mindset, then anything that I found would be, almost like you could pick and choose to find information to suit your narrative. I mean, and we see that that's what they do.
So, can I interrupt real quick?
Go ahead.
There's actually a psychological phenomenon called cognitive dissonance and confirmation bias. And both of those things, confirmation bias is something that all of us fall victim to, including myself. Being conscious of it makes it a lot easier to avoid doing it, but I myself even fall victim to this. And basically what it is as human beings, we look for things that reinforce what we believe or what we want to believe. And because you mentioned it at the very beginning of the show, it's hard to admit that you're wrong. And when a piece of evidence comes into your vision that makes you question something and makes you deal with that, I might be wrong about this, not very many people are secure enough with themselves to admit to themselves that they might be wrong, because then that means you have to alter some sort of behavior. And so what we as human beings do in order to avoid that internal conflict, our psyches look for things that back up what we believe, and that's confirmation bias, and they immediately discredit or minimize things that go contrary to what we believe. So it's kind of a defense mechanism. And if you're as intelligent as me or you, we're conscious of this, and we can use it to our advantage to make sure that we're not falling victim to it. And for this guy who's obviously probably more intelligent than both of us, he should be aware of these as well when he goes into an investigation. But some people, they just don't want to confront that about themselves, and that could be the case. But again, it's hard to speak for other people's motives, but it is very suspicious.
No, you're right. It's hard to speak for other people's motives. It's just, if I was going to look at it from, if I was going to look at it like he was doing something wrong and I was investigating him, I would be like, more than enough evidence to build a case.
Well, also,
just saying.
Also, there's the third factor, which is he's from academia. And academia is heavily government subsidized. And in academia, if you're one of the few professors that doesn't toe the socialist government solves all the problems party line, you don't get invited for talking engagements. You don't get invited on Discovery Channel. You don't get huge government grants. So he's got a financial and lifestyle incentive to turn a blind eye to these things as well.
Well, of course, that's why I say, even when I say that he's part of it, or he's if you use the term shill, he doesn't have to be part of the nefarious plan where, Michio has a black identification card that he whips out of his wallet and swipes into the secret reader in the wall, and bloop bloop, a door opens and he goes into the Illuminati chambers. I don't actually think that, but just being controlled via whatever government subsidies or government grants or direct cash, whatever. That's the way they control local governments and state governments too, right? That's one of the reasons the war on drugs still is as prolific as it is because the local sheriffs and the people that are against legalizing medicinal cannabis down here in Florida, if you look at the people that are against it, it's all people that make money off of it being illegal. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and that brings into question the whole asset forfeiture laws, where if they pull you over, there was just recently a case where a kid was staying with his grandparents and sneaking into the house. He locked himself out of the house, was sneaking in through the window to get in. Neighbors called the cops. The cops showed up, demanded to talk to him, see his ID, make sure that he was supposed to be there. Well, as they're going for his ID, they find some drugs in his pocket, and because he had the drugs in his pocket in his grandparents' house, they arrest him, and then they seize the grandparents' house. And it was like if memory serves, it was like a $300,000 house. It might have been less than that, but they just seized the house, and they seize cars, they seize bank accounts. If you get pulled over with over $1,000 in your pocket, whether you have drugs or not, they can just have the dog sniff it. And if the dog smells cocaine or indicates that he smells a drug, they seize that money, and you have to prove that it hasn't been used in a drug transaction, and that's almost impossible to do. And so the asset forfeiture laws, the money that they get for enforcing these federal things, the Bearcats and all the tanks that they get for free, all these retired military vehicles that they don't have any use for, so they're giving them out. There's so much financial incentive for them to wage the war on drugs.
Think about this. You put it on, again, a very base level. Even if you put all that aside, if people go, well, I still don't believe it. Okay, one of the reasons they're against cannabis legalization so much is that they know the facts about cannabis. And if they don't, and they actually believe the propaganda that's put out there, well, then they're being willfully ignorant at this point, because there's plenty of information to prove its benefits. Even doctors in other countries, studies in other countries, studies that have been done all around the world. Okay, so when you look at why they'd be against it, why are they so hardcore against cannabis? Because arresting somebody for smoking a joint is pretty easy to do, because you smell like weed. It's very easy to find on you, via the smell if they are smoking it in a vehicle or something. It's kind of easy to tell. It's in your system for a very long time. Like, say you smoke, if you're a regular smoker, it's in your system for at least 30 days, even after you stop. It'll still be in your blood, so they can do a blood test, even your urine in many cases. A lot of people are like, no, man, it'll be out of my system in a couple of weeks. Wrong. One of the things it does is it gets inside your fat cells of your body. So unless you have like 0% body fat, guess what? If you smoke on the regular, it's going to be in your fat cells, and it'll take about 45 days to fully leach out of your system. Okay, and that's if you're like a moderate to medium smoker. If you're really heavy, then it might even take longer. I know people that it's taken 2.5, 3 months where they quit to get a job, and it took them 3 months, quitting and not doing anything and cleansing their system and doing cleanses and everything else just to be able to clean their system. So it stays in your system a lot longer, so it's easier to nail you on a blood test. More people... it's a lot easier to deal with somebody if they're high, if they're smoking a joint, because most people, if they get caught smoking a joint, aren't going to try to fist fight you. They're just like, oh, man, right? So it's an easy arrest, and you can rack up police departments when they rack up drug arrests. It's not like, I'm sure it's broken down somewhere on a sheet somewhere, but the government doesn't say, well, you have to have 15 coke arrests. You have maybe to certain departments they do, but pretty much overall they just want a certain amount of drug arrests. And if they're arresting people for cannabis, well, it's easy, especially if there's people, if they're growing it, because you know that a lot of people are using it, even if it's not talked about. So it's out there, maybe more so prolific than other drugs. So, or what you would call drugs, the drug warriors, right? So they know it's easy busts. It's easy money at the end of the year. Look, we got 200 drug arrests. 198 of them were for people smoking joints in their car. But hey, look, we killed 15 people during some of the arrests. We shot someone's dog, an 8-year-old girl. Oorah. We got a chance to throw some grenades, too, so our SWAT team felt relevant. And, we had a good year, federal government. Can we get some more grant money? And they become addicted to those funds because, once you start getting money in, it's, just how, people go, oh, well, these people on food stamps, they're going to get used to it, and they'll never want to work for money, and they'll just want to use the government funds, and they'll rely on it. And to a certain degree, even though that's kind of like an ad hominem attack to a certain extent, the idea of, yes, you will shift your financial priorities, and you could get used to it. Well, just the cops do too. They get used to that federal money coming in for being drug warriors. And they don't want to turn that tap off. They want to be able to get cool equipment to fight the drug war. They want to be able to use their SWAT teams. They need reasons to do all this. So, you can't have prohibition end, Nathan. God forbid. Anyway, the break is sneaking up on us. I'm going to stop us right there. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a few short minutes. Stay tuned. Wow, the show is just going by super fast. Don't go anywhere. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment already. Where did the show go, Nathan? We started chatting, and all of a sudden, poof! It's 11:30. Wow,
Yeah, it's been a good conversation.
Yeah, man. Well, that's what happens when you have a good conversation, good flow of information. You know, time flies. Like they say, time flies when you're having fun. Before we forget, because I know we're going to get back into it, and then the next thing you know will be the end of the show. Plug all your stuff again, whatever: Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, website, radio show, and go.
You put me on the spot. LiveFreeFM.com is where you can usually find everything that I try to put all in one place. You can look on YouTube for me. I think it's Nathan Fraser, Fraser. You can look on Facebook for me. I'm just as irritating on those platforms as I am on the radio. So if you like having your sensibilities insulted, if you like having your view of reality questioned, check out the show over at livefreefm.com and follow me on Twitter or Facebook or wherever. I think I'm most active on Facebook, but that might change in the near future. I don't know. Facebook seems to be one of those things. Facebook is starting to, at least for me, it's starting to feel like one of those things that keeps me in bondage. So I might be becoming a little bit less active in the near future on it.
I hear that, man. Facebook will suck you in.
Yeah.
Even if you only use it for advertising. Like I only use it for the radio show. I don't have my own personal account. And still, sometimes I'll find myself getting sidetracked because you'll see an article or something, or somebody will start a conversation and you'll get into a debate with somebody on a thread. So I try not to do that anymore because I think it's a waste of time. Unless it's about a certain thing, I only use it really to promote the stuff. And I interact with the listeners. I can't say that I don't. I do get into conversations with the listeners, and I enjoy them. So I don't consider that a waste of time. But it can suck you in other ways, and that's what it's designed for. It's designed to, turn certain switches on in your brain, and all of a sudden, the next thing you know, I'm just going to go here for a second. It's 3 hours later.
Well, it has a couple things working for it. It has that personal instant gratification kind of addiction to it, where you type something and it makes it real easy for other people to click like and make you feel important. It also has the ability to have very heated arguments facilitated on its medium. And so it has some things that appeal to our maybe lesser human nature side. But at the same time, it has I get a lot of really cool ideas for the show scrolling through my newsfeed. I see articles that I wouldn't see otherwise. I see information and ideas that I wouldn't see otherwise. So it's a double-edged sword, but yeah, definitely I sometimes find myself spending way too much time, and after like an hour of scrolling through the news feed and reading all these things, and I'm like, well, I got one good idea for the show, or I got one idea for a project, or I got one good idea to sit here and ponder on, but I could have done something very productive in the last hour and a half, and instead I sat there scrolling down, clicking one button on my mouse.
Exactly, and you could have been doing other stuff. No, I found myself just wasting time, and all of a sudden I'll be like, "Oh my God, I could have gotten archives done. I'm behind on this. I'm behind on that." Because I do everything myself. So if I don't keep myself on a very strict, regime, so to say, regiment, whatever you want to call it, I end up. I'll end up, oh God, 3 weeks later, I forgot to put this show up. You know what I mean? Like, I just, I haven't rendered it. I have a list right now. I have 9 shows that actually, including tomorrow's and this, it'll be 11, that I have to edit and then throw up on to YouTube, because I make a YouTube video out of it. So I have to do that, and then I have to link it to Federal Jack. So there's 9 broadcasts that I haven't even typed up a description for yet, and put up on Federal Jack or in the download section, just because you get sidetracked. I'll end up doing something else, or sometimes I'll do an interview off air, and then I'll be wanting to get back to that and edit it. So you get sidetracked with that. It's just I know how it is, and it can get frustrating at times. It really can.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, the average listener out there, doesn't really realize how much work we put into this. They think that we just show up and naturally have these great conversations. I mean, not to toot our own horns, but I think tonight was a really great conversation. But a lot of people think that it's just get in front of a mic and start spewing out words and put a show together and clip it and put it on the internet. And a lot of people take it for granted. And it's great that there's people like me and you and Chris out there doing it and making this stuff available for free. But it's a lot of work, and we make a lot of personal sacrifices. And a lot of people go back to the Matrix analogy, the guy that's like, oh, I just want to plug back in and I don't care if the steak isn't real. I just want to enjoy the steak. A lot of people, even inside the Liberty community, but just in general, a lot of people, they're content with working, watching TV, watching a movie, going to sleep, working, watching TV, watching a movie, going to sleep. And sometimes I envy that because I sacrifice a lot of that stuff myself, and I don't even do a 4-night a week show like you. I just do the one night, and I still end up not being able to do other things that I probably would enjoy more. But I feel like the benefit, I get letters from listeners all the time telling me, I get donations, but usually it's the letters from listeners that really mean the most to me when they tell me, they refer back to a specific show and how it changed the way they thought about something, or how it changed the way they feel about something, or how they approach something, or had some sort of impact on their life. And when that kind of thing happens, you spend a lot of time, you feel frustrated, especially when you're in your position where you're 9 episodes back, you've got 9 of them you got to do, and you feel like you're just kicking and flapping to stay above water. But when you realize that there's people out there that are actually taking this information, applying it to their lives, and living a better life because of it, that's like, for me, that's more gratifying than 1,000 Facebook likes or $1,000 donation to the show is pretty cool too. But but knowing that we're sacrificing our pleasurable time that we could be sitting watching American Idol, if you find that pleasurable, or whatever, it takes a lot of work to do this. And when you get an indication that it's actually changing people's lives, that's probably one of the best feelings, and it makes it all worthwhile, in my opinion.
What kept me going when we first started Federal Jack, and I thought nobody was listening, one day I got a letter from a guy in the mail to our P.O. box, and there was a check for $250 in there, made out to cash. And in the letter it said, I'm sending this to you, and there'll be more payments in the mail. There's also something else coming for you. Thank you for what you guys do. You're a voice in the wilderness. And this is back in like 2000, early 2007. A couple days later, I get a box waiting for me at my P.O. box for the website, and it's a DVD duplicator. It's used, but it's a DVD duplicator loaded with a ton of different movies. And this guy was like, "Look, I've already made this many with it, but he was moving to the Philippines. He's still a listener to this very day, but he was moving to like the Philippines for a while. Him and his brother, over the course of like a year and a half, sent me a couple more checks for about between $200 and $250. And every time I would use them to go out, I could have easily just cashed the checks into my own checking account. And in fact, I had friends that were like, man, because there were times, like that was at a time that I was really hurting for money. I was pretty close to being homeless because of the VA messing with me with my benefits because I wasn't able to work. And I had friends that were like, look, you're down and out. Why don't you put that money and use it for this or for that? And I said, because it wasn't sent to me under those pretenses. It was sent to me under the idea that I would use it for what I'm going to use it for. And if I violate that trust, even if the person doesn't know it, the universe will. And it may sound cheesy or corny to others, but I believe in that. So I didn't use it for my own personal use. I used it to buy DVD blanks. And I would just make DVDs and give them away. And then one of the checks I used to actually order the first set of FederalJack.com T-shirts. And we ended up not selling any of the first batch. I think I sold like 4 or 5 out of an order of 50. And the rest we ended up giving away. If somebody donated to the site, I would just send them an email. Hey, what size T-shirt are you? I'm a large. Okay. And they would usually, with the donation, come on PayPal would come their address, and I would just mail them a T-shirt. And they would be like, hey, thanks for the shirt. And I would send them business cards and flyers and free stuff. And, by doing that, it just, there was no reason. I didn't want to make a ton of money, and I wanted to stay faithful to what I was trying to do. I mean, the donations, I don't get many donations now. I mean, I only get maybe once in a while I get somebody that donates $25. I have a husband and wife team up in Pennsylvania. They know who they are. I don't want to give them. I don't want to say their names on air. I don't know if that'll get them in trouble or not. If you guys want me to, next time I'll give you an on-air shout out with your names. But you know who you are. Without fail, every month they donate $25. It's all they can afford. But the two of them listen to my show, and they've been listeners for years, and they donate $25. And I have other people that once in a while they'll donate $5 here or there. But that's really all I get. Do I care? No, because it's not about the money. And I always use that money. I never use it for personal uses. I always use it in terms of the radio show. Like, I sold a couple T-shirts over the course of the past couple months, and with the couple donations that I get, like the $30 a month in donations I get, over the course of about 4.5 months, I saved up enough to buy myself a new microphone because I need a new mic because some of my equipment is a bit older, and I needed to upgrade it. But I didn't buy. I could have used it to buy personal stuff. I didn't. I used it to specifically upgrade for the radio show because that's what it was donated to me, for. I won't use it for personal stuff, and that is what, to me, just people putting that trust in me and that faith in me, and that we listen to your show. Thank you for what you do. You've helped us through some tough times. Things like that. That's why I continue to do this. It's not about the money because I really don't make any money, and anything I get, it goes right back into the radio show or the website or to give out free DVDs and stuff. I mean, I've given out at least 40 or 50,000 DVDs over the course of time. That's how many. Literally, I gave out over 5,000 copies of Why in the World Are They Spraying when it first came out. We just kept trying to get the idea of them, altering the weather and doing weird things with the planet's atmosphere, trying to get people to pay attention, just look up. So, I mean, I know that, over the years, there's been thousands and thousands and thousands of copies that have been made from those thousands of copies that I sent out there, and that's good. That's awesome. That's the whole point of doing this is because, when I see somebody tell me that they saw a DVD that I put together, like a compilation DVD that I put together years ago, and and somebody showed them a business card, and they recently saw it, and this person has had this for years, and they just showed them this website because they just maybe met this person or whatever. Like, to me, that makes it all worth it. Like, those people can respect my opinion that much that they've been around that long. I get the emails from people saying, thank you for helping me. This show helped me through a tough time. And I'm like, really? Because there are times that I think that, like, there's 3 people listening and, like, no one cares what I have to say. We all have that, right? Not that you get down on yourself, but you're like, I don't have an ego. So, I mean, we all do to a certain extent, you know what I mean? But I don't allow mine, I should say, to get out of control. So I always just put myself in check, and I'm like, no one's listening or whatnot. And it's always weird, at least to me anyway. I guess maybe weird's not the right word, but I find it interesting, maybe is the correct term. Who listens and the reasons they listen. And when people tell me, hey, you helped me through a tough time or something, that makes it all worthwhile. I could be having a, behind the scenes, you could be like, oh man, is it worth all the time and energy I put into this? And you're thinking that for weeks, and then out of nowhere you get an email, and someone tells you in this email, maybe it's only 2 or 3 paragraphs, but they tell you that a show you did, saw them. I had a lady tell me that a show I did about fear years ago. She sent me this like really long email explaining to me that the show I did just about what fear is and how to, breaking it down and everything and how not to let it control you changed her whole life because she applied it to her real life. And she said to me, she goes, thank you so much. Because of that broadcast, I decided to listen to you. And just because I took, your advice and I ran with it in my own life and, applied it accordingly, my whole life is changed and much better. And I just want to let you know, you changed my life for the positive. Thank you so much. Knowing that someone was able to do that just from listening to a broadcast I did, that's what makes it worthwhile. You know what I mean?
Okay, so to bring this back to something that we brought up at the very beginning, people have this fear that if we're not forced to do the right thing it just won't get done. Or if we just rely on the free market to make sure the right thing gets done, it won't happen. We need to have a system of force, whether it's religion or government or whatever it is, forcing people to do the right thing because there's no incentive. But people, that story right there proves, and I go through the same thing sometimes. I have feelings getting ready to do my show, and I'm like, is this even really worth my 2 hours of doing? Are there people listening? And obviously we know there are people listening, but is it, for the amount of people that we're reaching, a couple thousand out of billions of people, is it really worth it? And you can really get that insignificant feeling. And when you realize that just one person doing something because they believe in it, because they believe it's a necessity, and you start realizing all these other things that most of us agree are necessities. Most of us agree that having roads is a necessity. Most of us agree that having a marketplace to buy things and sell things is a necessity. Most of us agree that having some sort of defense system, some sort of arbitration system to solve problems, it's all things that a lot of us agree are necessary. And yet people think that we won't come together and figure out how to make those things. But like what you do on your show proves that you do what you think is necessary. And there's people that find value in it, and they reinforce that, and they say, hey, I find what you do necessary. Whether I can send you some finances to help you out, or whether I can just at least reach out and let you know that there are other people that find what you're doing necessary and appreciate it. That right there is evidence that if we, like my show, every once in a while I run into a hiccup with a microphone or a processor or something like that, and there's always donators, and I don't even have to ask usually. There's always just people that it seems almost synchronistic or mystical that when I need something, all of a sudden some money shows up in the PayPal. But the fact is people find value, and they find my show necessary. They find your show necessary, and it's a very small amount of people that find it necessary, but they work together to make it happen. You get up and do it because you find it necessary. Other people donate some money to help you improve the sound quality or make sure that you have the tools that you need to do it because they find it necessary. If small things that have such a limited audience like what we're doing, enough people can find it necessary to make sure that it happens without having to point guns and rob people, then why do we think as the beautiful, brilliant race that we are, that we couldn't come together and solve problems of supplying things that we all agree are necessary? It's just crazy that people don't realize all the evidence that's in front of them on a day-to-day basis, that people will work together and work to promote and build the things that they find necessary. I don't know. I have so much faith in humanity and faith in my neighbors way more than I have faith in politicians and slick business suits to solve problems.
How do you think volunteer fire departments work? I mean, yes, the town will set aside a certain amount of money because the chiefs of each department and the first aid squad will set or submit every year a budget, and some of your tax dollars pays for things like fire trucks and stuff like that. And in some cases, they even have to do fundraisers for that, and some basic equipment. But there are times, like the department I was on, if we wanted to, in the days if we wanted air packs, SCBAs, self-contained breathing apparatus, like Scott packs. If we wanted them, the town couldn't afford them, so the firehouse raised its own money to buy a certain amount of packs each year and to buy new packs and stuff. And then eventually, sometimes the town would allocate certain money, but the chief would usually have to bring it up to the fire. There's a company, even though they're in one building, usually like volunteer departments, you have an engine, you have the department, and then you have the company. The department is when you're out fighting fires, and you have your chief and your lieutenants and your captain. And then there's the company side, which handles all like the business. That's where the funds and stuff. And the chief would go to like the president, who's on the company end, and would say, hey, during one of the meetings once a month, that we're submitted in, or whatever, you have to bring it up to the membership. We'd like $5,000 or $6,000 or whatever it is to buy this, this type of equipment and stuff. Well, where would the money in these departments come from? Because they're all volunteers, so the town didn't pay them. That wasn't part of the budget. The budget was allotted to buy certain equipment that the chief would say, hey, next year I need to buy this, that, or other thing. But if we needed extra stuff that we couldn't get through the town budget, where'd the money come from? Didn't come from the guys. I mean, we would buy things here and there, and keep things running and stuff, and we all did our own thing. But where'd the money come from? It came from the general public. Every year, each firehouse and the first aid squad would do a fund drive, and we used to do it where we would put on, we had you had fire department T-shirts. We had golf shirts with the department logo embroidered on the front, and we would tuck them in our pants, put belts and everything, get dressed up, nicely, didn't look like dirt bags, and we would go around and we'd knock on the doors and introduce ourselves, and we would leave a little slip and say, hey, look, you don't have to donate, no worries. If you want to, if you feel like donating, here. If not, no worries. And we talk to them if you have any questions. If you guys, have any worries, this is where the firehouse is. It was almost like a meet and greet, and we'd leave them a donation envelope and a little slip with some information about the firehouse and blah, 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 and emergency phone numbers and everything else. And if they needed stickers, if they had kids, and, here's stickers to let us know where the kids' bedrooms are, for pets and stuff like that, whatever. We would give them that for free. And they like that. And I would say about 75 to 80% of the people would usually donate. Even if it was $5 or $10, they would donate. And it added up. And it enabled us to buy stuff and pay for things, to the point where we always had a surplus. We always had more than we needed. That way, in case there was an emergency or something major happened, we had the money there to take care of it. And it was not an issue. And look, the government itself of the town was not involved in that. We did all that on our own. And all the guys that were in the company didn't get paid, or the department itself. None of us were paid. We were all volunteer. So not only did we go fight the fires, but then we had this organization inside of the department itself where you took care of all your bureaucratic stuff, right? And it was still done and handled, and government was not involved in it. Look at that.
Well, it's an example of when human beings work together towards win-win situations, everybody prospers. And when people are willing, and it's not even a thing of self-sacrifice. It's like, oh, you're sacrificing your time to go volunteer, or, oh, you're sacrificing 50 of your dollars to go to these volunteers. That's not what it is. It's people saying, what I'm giving is more beneficial to me than what I'm getting out of this, what we're all getting out of this is more beneficial than what I'm getting. Everybody that's involved is doing it because they believe that what they're getting out of it and what the community is getting out of it is more beneficial than what they're being asked to put into it. And everybody's getting more than what they put into it. And the people that give the money for it, they know that you guys are going to be there if they need you. You know that if they need you, the people are going to be willing to pay for what they need to have done. It's a beautiful example of when people work together towards a win-win situation, it creates abundance. And we have so many examples of when we put the mentality of club the girl over the head and take her home and rape her to get laid. When we use that mentality to solve problems, it ends up with poverty, it ends up with war, it ends up with just the worst things that humanity has ever seen. And when we say, let's work together to voluntarily solve this problem in win-win situations, it creates abundance. And when you look at it like that, you have to ask yourself, why are we still using the old method?
And it makes no sense for people to say that, well, this is a new level of thinking. No, it's not. Volunteer fire departments have been around. They were the first fire departments. I mean, that's Benjamin Franklin created the first department. And yeah, I mean, there's some shady stuff that they used to do with the whole insurance. And if you didn't have the thing, they let it burn and all this other stuff. But
departments, publicly funded city departments have been caught doing the exact same thing.
Oh yeah, but like volunteer departments, like the department I was on, if I remember correctly, it was formed in 1923. I think was the foundation date of the department. So, or the engine company that firehouse itself. It was founded in 1925, if I remember correctly, or no, 1923 rather. So if it was founded in 1923 and it's been all volunteer the entire time, and it was working, perfectly fine when I was in it, and it was in its 70s at the time when I was in it. My father was in it, my uncle was in it, my brother was in it. And it didn't seem to have a problem. I mean, yes, you have infighting and all that, but that's a side art thing. That's a level of humanity and whether or not we screw each other over and stuff. But that's, I mean, on a functional, like mechanically functioning way, it worked fine without the government coming in. In fact, when the liaisons from the government, from the town government would come down to the meetings, they were more of a pain in the ass and useless than anything else. And they would create more chaos than anything else. And of course, you have your own levels of bureaucracy inside. But the point is, we didn't need them. You don't need the government to build roads. It's that simple. Anyway, Nathan, I'm looking at the clock, and we are out of time, brother. We literally have about 45 seconds left. Thank you so much for coming on again. You got to come back on soon.
Thank you for having me on. It was a blast.
Every time you come on, you make my brain fire off like a Category 5 hurricane shooting off tornadoes and thunderstorms. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget to check Nathan's broadcast out here on Truth Frequency Radio. Go over to his website, rip all of his archives, put them on your phone, your MP3 player, whatever. Listen to them in your car. Rip everybody's shows. I mean, it's that simple. Technology, it's just too easy now to educate yourself. There's no excuse. Anyway, we're out of time. As I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are an inside job. Be your own hero, ladies and gentlemen. I have faith in you. I know you all can do it. Just believe in yourselves. I love you. Catch you all again tomorrow night. I'm out.